welcome to a new ship tour, and we're taking a look at the Aurora of P&O Cruises, and as always we're starting with a few general facts. The ship is 270 meters long, 32.2 meters wide, can take up to 1,874 passengers on board and has a gross tonnage of 76,152. She was built in the year 2000 at the Maya shipyard in Papenburg in Germany and is currently the oldest and smallest ship in the fleet of P&O Cruises, mainly sailing with British guests as an adults-only ship. She was built for P&O Cruises and is sailing for them since then. We're starting our ship tour as always on the lowest deck, and that is deck number 5, that is the F deck, and here we have mainly cabins, but we have a few public areas, so we're now heading aft of the ship to the midship section where we can find the atrium and the reception desk. So we can now go through the cabin hallway, and now we're reaching the small atrium area here on deck 5, the F deck, which is the only public area on deck 5. There's also the medical center on deck 4, but otherwise there's nothing on deck 4, so we can start here on deck 5. And here we can see the beautiful atrium, which is very impressive and already one of the highlights of the ship. It stretches over 4 decks, and here on deck 5 we have the reception, the palm court and the loyalty and cruise sails, so here you can also book your next cruise directly on board. Of course, I've also included pictures again, so we can see the public areas with a bit better lighting, and here we can see the beautiful atrium once again. And as there are no more public areas on deck 5, we can head up to deck number 6 and we can use the stairs here in the main atrium. Deck 6 is also called the E deck. And here we have a few more public areas that we can see. Here we can take another look at this beautiful atrium, which is already showing the design of the ship. I can already tell you now that she immediately became one of my favorite ships. Directly when I came on board, I felt like being on a real cruise ship. I really love the classic cruise ship design combined with some modern influences. So it does not feel like an outdated ship, but it feels like a proper cruise ship. So it's a very nice combination of traditional style and modern style, and we can already see that here in the atrium. On deck 6, the E deck, we have a big shop where we can buy, for example, jewelry, but also cigarettes, alcohol and other tax-free items can be bought here on deck 6. Here we can see the beautiful atrium once again. Here we can see the shopping area on the pictures. Already this is a big shopping area, but we have another shopping area one deck above, so there are a lot of options to go shopping on board. Here we can see explorers. Here you can book your next excursion, but as always I would recommend booking your excursion in advance to make sure that it's not already fully booked, as excursions are selling out quickly, especially the best ones. Here we can see the shopping area once again. As you can see here, you can mostly buy expensive things, and now we are in one of the main staircases, and here we also have the entrance to the Medina restaurant, which is one of 2 main restaurants. And as you can see, the design is very traditional but not outdated. Here we again can clearly see the typical design of a proper cruise ship. You feel like on a ship. That's the big difference to the newer ships. Newer ships mainly have a modern design which looks more or less the same on all ships, but it doesn't particularly make you feel like on a cruise ship anymore. You just feel like in a modern city hotel, for example. But here on the Aurora you feel like on a proper cruise ship. You can also see this on the big promenade, which is a walk around promenade, so you can walk all the way around the ship. So when you're at sea, you can have a nice stroll all the way around the ship, which is also not possible on most modern ships. We're now on deck 7, the promenade deck. There is still one area on deck 6 we haven't seen yet, but there's no direct connection. It's only reachable via deck 5 or deck 7, so we're gonna get back down. Here we cannot walk around because the gangway was attached here to the promenade, so they blocked off a little part of the promenade, but we're gonna see the rest later on in the video. For now we are inside of deck 7, and here in the front we have the big theater, which is the Curzon Theater. As you can see, it is pretty big and spacious. Shows are usually shown twice, as we have 2 seatings in the restaurant so that everybody can enjoy the show. There are 2 shows each night, and still we have a pretty big theater, so there's more than enough space. As you can see, it's much bigger than on most new cruise ships, even though most new cruise ships are much bigger. As with less than 2,000 passengers on board, the Aurora nowadays I would say, is even a small cruise ship. We are now heading aft of the ship, and here we have one of my favorite locations on board, and this is Anderson's Pub, which comes in a very traditional look. It feels like being on a old luxurious cruise ship or even an ocean liner. As you can see, a very nice design. Of course, it is not a modern design, but not everything has to be modern. Sometimes it's also beautiful to have an older design which is not outdated but just feels a bit more luxurious, a bit more classic. And that's what Anderson's is. It is a very classic, traditional pub, a very beautiful bar, and I really enjoy the design of it, even though it's not the most modern. But most of the time I prefer this design over the very modern design because it's unique, and you will not find a bar like this on most other cruise ships as well. Directly next to Anderson's we have Charlie's, which is basically an addition of Anderson's. The same cruise taking care of you when you take a seat here, but it looks a bit more modern, it's brighter, and it's an atrium lounge, so we are back in the beautiful atrium. But as you can see, it's a rather small area, and here we can see the second deck with shopping opportunities. Here you can buy some accessories, you can buy clothing, watches, sunglasses, and things like that. And there are also the P&O Cruises souvenirs, so here you can also buy some logo products. We're now walking past the shopping area and we're now heading back to the area where we went into Anderson's, so we've already seen that part. We can turn around now, but of course we're going to take another look into this beautiful atrium, which I really like. I think it looks really elegant. As you can see, there is a lot of Christmas decorations. I was on board in December, shortly before Christmas. That's why there were so many Christmas decorations. Here we can take another look into the shopping area. As you can see, there are also some things for children, even though it is an adults-only shop, but of course you can buy some presents for the kids at home. And of course, P&O is not an adults-only company, but this ship, being the smallest one, is considered an adults-only ship, but P&O Cruises have much bigger ships on which children and families are of course welcome, and those bigger ships are also more suitable for children. Now we are reaching Masquerade. Masquerade is another beautiful lounge and bar, and it can also be used as a theater. As you can see, there's a big stage, and we have theater-like seating, so you have a good view of the stage from almost all seats, so it can also be used for some evening entertainment. Here we can see the picture of the stage, and of course we can see some pictures of the seating areas. So not only in the theater you have a fantastic evening program, also in some of the other bars there are some possibilities for entertainment. For example, in the theater there was a show ensemble consisting of 11 artists plus a band, which is a much bigger show ensemble than on most other cruise ships, so entertainment was fantastic on board of Aurora of P&O Cruises. Here we have another entrance to the Medina restaurant, one of the two main restaurants. We've already seen it. Here is a second entrance. Usually it's not used, they are usually using the other entrance, but here we have another second entrance. We're walking past it now, and now we're getting to the art gallery. Of course, we have an art gallery on board, as on almost all cruise ships, but it's a bit smaller, as the ship itself is also a bit smaller than most cruise ships. But the basic idea is the same. You have some pieces of art that you can buy on board here at the art gallery. We're now reaching Champions. Champions is a sports bar, and it also holds the casino of the ship. Here on this side it is a traditional bar. We have a big screen in front where you can watch some sport, for example, or other things can be shown here, and on the other side we have a casino. As the ship is a bit smaller, also the casino is a bit smaller than on most other cruise ships, but it's big enough, I would say, for the size of the Aurora. We're now almost aft of the ship. We have one more public area to see here on this deck, and then we're getting back down to deck 6, as we have skipped one public area, because right now we're above the kitchen and there is a second restaurant on deck 6, but there's no connection from the Medina restaurant to the Alexandria restaurant, as the kitchen is in between. So we're heading back down there after taking a look here at Champions and the casino, and at Carmen's, which is the last public area here on deck 7. So now we're heading firstly to Carmen's, which is another big show lounge on board, which comes with a big stage. You're gonna see that in a couple of seconds. And here we are at Carmen's. And as you can see, each and every bar has its very own design. All bars are looking different. So if you don't like the design of one of the bars, it doesn't mean that you will not like the whole ship. It just means that you can go to any other bar because all of the bars have their very unique own design, which I really like. On newer ships, a lot of bars are looking more or less the same. They are supposed to look as modern as possible, but here they are all looking quite unique. So here we have a very colorful design, and as you can see, we have another big stage, and almost all seats have a good view of the stage, so it can also be used as a nightclub for dancing, but it can also be used for some smaller shows, for example. So it's also quite flexible location. And now, as promised, we're heading back down to deck 6. We're now at the main entrance of the Alexandria restaurant, which is the second big main restaurant, and you will get assigned to one of them. And you can also choose whether you want to have the first or the second seating. I'm always recommending the second seating, as then you have more time because there's no second group already waiting. So in the first seating you always have to leave the restaurant at a certain time, and in the second seating there's always a bit more time, so in my opinion it's a bit more relaxed. Also here we have a very beautiful and typical cruise ship design, I would say. It was a nice, comfortable and spacious restaurant. We're now back at the promenade. As you can see, there are also some seating possibilities on the promenade, which you usually find on newer ships, but also here on the Aurora the promenade is also used as a public area, but it is also a spacious walking area. You can now, as you can see, walk around aft of the ship to the other side, so it is a proper walk around promenade. And from here we can now go up to deck number 8, and on deck 8, which is the D deck, we have one of the main highlights of the ship, because here at the aft of the ship we have a nice terrace area. As you can see, this area stretches over almost all decks, which can be rarely seen on newer cruise ships, as most newer ships have expensive balcony cabins. Here, of course, you could have added here a lot more cabins on the Aurora instead of having this terrace here, but this clearly shows that she is still beautiful, traditional ocean liner style cruise ship where public areas and spaces are more important than making money from every single area of the ship. So here we have a lot of outdoor spaces. I was on board for a short cruise to Belgium in December, so of course we could not really use the aft terrace, but I guess this will be a fantastic place, for example, for a cruise in the Caribbean, as you have so much outdoor space on this ship, which is quite rare on newer ships. Here for sure you will not have to search for an available sun lounger, as there's just so much space for only 1,874 passengers. We do also have a pool here. This is the terrace pool, of course. It comes with 2 hot tubs, and we also have the terrace bar here on the side, which serves drinks for the aft terrace, especially on the lower decks. Also here on the picture we can see that there is so much outdoor space here, which is very, very nice. We can now head back inside. Here on deck 8 we have a handful of cabins, but just very few cabins, and then we have public areas again, so we are heading there now. Here we can see one of the staircases. The ship has 3 main staircases, which is typical for most cruise ships. Some newer cruise ships there are only 2 main staircases, but here we have one at the aft of the ship, one in the middle and one in the front. We're now at the Glass House, which is a combination of a bar and a restaurant. As you can see, it's mainly a bar, but there are a few tables where also food is served, so it also is a specialty restaurant, which is not included, of course. When the ship was built, it was not a standard to have a lot of different food venues, so here they transformed a traditional bar into a combined bar and a restaurant to keep the ship up to modern standards. Nowadays, a lot of passengers want to have different dining options. They want to have specialty restaurants. So that's what they did here in the Glass House. So now the Glass House is not only a bar, but also a restaurant. We can continue on to the front of the ship, and we will now reach the photo gallery, which, just like the rest of the ship, is a combination of traditional and modern styles. So we do have a few printed pictures shown, but I guess those are those pictures that have already been ordered, or some example pictures, and other pictures that the onboard photographers are taking can be seen on digital screens, of course. On the right side we have the Playhouse, which is a cinema on board. It was not open yet, so I cannot take a look inside, and also on my short cruise I didn't want to watch a movie, so I was never inside the Playhouse. So here we have the entrance. Cannot see it in the video, and right next to it we have Vanderbilt's. Vanderbilt's is a traditional card room, so here you can play cards, you can also play some board games. This is quite traditional on British ships especially. You will mostly find a card room like this. It's pretty spacious here on the Aurora. Here at Vanderbilt's you can also find the harbor plaques, at least some of them. We'll see some more later on in the video. And now we can continue heading further on to the front. Now we are reaching the atrium once again, and here we have another atrium bar. This is Raffles Court and Raffles Bar, which is more like a cafe serving Costa coffee. And as you can see, it also has this very nice combination of traditional design but modern furniture, a modern carpet, modern chairs, but those traditional old wooden walls. So a very, very nice combination in my opinion. That's why I would prefer a ship like the Aurora always over newer ships, because I just really like this traditional style, which gives you the feeling on actually being on a cruise ship. So here we have another nice bar, another atrium bar. As I said, mainly a cafe, and from here we have this beautiful view down into the atrium, as we are now on the highest deck of the atrium. And here we also have another specialty restaurant, which is the Sintu, which of course is an Indian restaurant with Indian food. It's not included, it's a specialty restaurant, and of course it's quite traditional to have an Indian restaurant on a British cruise ship. Further on to the front we only have cabins, so we can now go up to deck 9, which is the sea deck. On deck 9 we also only have cabins, but as we have the aft terrace, we have a public area there. So now we're walking straight through the very long cabin hallway. As you can see, it's completely straight. That's quite typical for ships built on the Meyer Werft, Meyer shipyard in Papenburg. They always have a quite logical layout, and it's quite easy to get along with the layout of the ship. It's quite difficult to get lost. Also here on the Aurora, it's quite easy to get around. Here we are at the second deck of the aft terrace, and as you can see, it's not used for any public areas. It's just a calm area with sun loungers, chairs, so you can sit down here, enjoy the view over the stern wave. So it's a nice place to sit down, for example, on a day at sea, because it's also windproofed, of course, as we're right at the aft of the ship. So we can head up now to deck number 10, which is the B deck. Also here, this is the only public area, and also here it's just a calm seating area. So as you can see, there is so much outer space on this ship. Even if every single passenger of the ship wants to sit outside, there will be enough space. As this was the only public area on deck 10, we can head up to deck 11, which is the A deck. Also here we have an outer area, the aft terrace, but we also have an indoor public area, which is the weights and measures, the fitness room, the gym on board. It was still closed, so we cannot go inside, but we will see it later on in the video, as there are some windows where we can take a look inside the fitness studio, the gym on board. So now we can head up to deck number 12, which is the next deck with a lot of public areas. It's also called the Lido deck, and there we will have 2 more pools, and we have the spa area. We can see it here on the picture. As always, I cannot head inside as it was still closed and it's not possible to film in there when it's open. It's a bit smaller than on newer cruise ships, and it is located between the 2 main pools of the ship. We are now at a crystal pool, which is a covered pool, at least when the weather conditions are not good. It has a sliding roof, a retractable roof, so when the weather is good, the glass roof can be moved away and it's an outdoor pool. And when the weather is bad or the ship is sailing from the UK in the winter season, just like on this cruise, they can just easily close the retractable roof, and it's an indoor pool, so the ship is also very well equipped for cruises in the winter season, even though it is also perfectly equipped for cruises in warmer destinations, as we have a lot of outdoor areas, as we have already seen in the video. So the pool is, I would say, standard size for a cruise ship. Of course, on some newer cruise ships there are bigger pools, but considering the age of the ship, which is now almost 26 years old, it is a quite nice and decent pool. Right behind it we have the Horizon restaurant, which is another main restaurant. This is the buffet restaurant. As you can see, it also looks quite nice and modern with a new carpet, modern furniture. It doesn't feel like a canteen like the buffet restaurant sometimes does on cruise ships, but here it feels like a proper restaurant. We have a buffet in the middle with different themed islands. I'm not the biggest fan of the layout of the buffet, but it's of course personal taste, and in the UK it usually works very well with queuing. On German ships with a buffet like this, it sometimes gets a bit difficult when people are queuing from all sides, but here on the British ship it usually worked very well. Right after the ship we have the pennant bar, so we are now again at the aft terrace, and here we have another bar. This can of course also be used as an outdoor dining area, so you can take food from the buffet here to this area and eat outside. And we have the pennant bar where you can get drinks, and of course this bar also serves the decks below, as we are now again at the aft terrace. So if you found a nice seat 1 or 2 decks below, you can also head up to the pennant bar and get your drinks here. Here we can see this wonderful aft terrace again, and here we can see the outdoor dining area of the Beach House, which is another specialty restaurant serving mainly American food. It's also part of the Horizon buffet, so for breakfast, for example, this area can also be used as an extension of the Horizon buffet restaurant, and in the evening it becomes the Beach House restaurant, which is then not included. Here we can also see the seating area, which looks more or less the same like the rest of the Horizon restaurant, slightly different chairs, but otherwise it looks the same. We're now quickly walking through the restaurant and the crystal pool area, and here we are now at the crystal bar, which is in charge for the drinks around the crystal pool, and right next to it we have an ice cream bar where you can get nice ice cream, and next to it we have the Lido grill. Here you can get a little snack, for example, instead of lunch or in the afternoon, or also, for example, when you skipped breakfast on a sea day and you're waking up a bit later, you can also get here, because the Lido Grill usually opens a bit earlier than the main restaurants for lunch. From the Lido Grill we can now head to the next pool, which is the Riviera pool, and that's quite interesting because it is located on deck 12, but actually half a deck lower. As you can see, it's a bit lower than the rest of the deck, so it's basically located somewhere between deck 11 and 12. That means it's absolutely windproofed, because we also have deck 13 above, so there's for sure no wind here at the Riviera pool. We have a lot of outdoor areas here, once again enough space for sun lounges around the pool area, and in the background you can already see the bar, which we will take a closer look at later on. So we're now taking a look at all those public areas here around the pool. We can of course also head down to the pool, and from the pool we can even head further down back on deck 11, and here we can now take a look at weights and measures, the fitness room, the gym on board, which has a pretty good size for a small ship like the Aurora. Mainly comes with endurance sport equipment, but we have also some other sport equipment here, and it's even quite good sports equipment made by Techno Gym. So also the gym is pretty nice, and we can now head back up to the pool. Walk along the pool, as you can see, is about the same size like the crystal pool. Not big enough for proper swimming, but it is a nice and decent pool. We can walk across this little bridge there to get to the other side, and then we can take a closer look at the Riviera bar, which is taking care of the drinks here for the Riviera pool area. Here we can see the pool once again, and you can see the interesting layout of this pool area here on the picture as well. And now we're heading to the Riviera bar. Here you can see the hot tub also on the side, also available here. So all pool areas also come with hot tubs. And here we can see the Riviera bar. And now we've already seen all public areas on deck 12, the Lido deck. In the front we only have cabins, the highest cabins on board, but otherwise there are no more public areas, so we can now head to deck number 13, which is called the Sun Deck. Here we can head up the stairs, and now we're reaching my favorite area on board, which is the crow's nest. Before taking a closer look at the crow's nest, we can take a look at the Uganda room, which is the wedding venue and also a meeting room. Here we've just seen some more harbor plaques, and now we are in the Uganda room, which also looks very nice. It's named after an old ship of P&O Cruises, the Uganda, which we can also see in a second as a ship's model. And also, in my opinion, this room looks a bit like on an old ocean liner. It's a quite nice design. Here we can see the model of the Uganda, and here we can see the Uganda room as well. And of course, we can also see the room on the picture. And now we're heading into the crow's nest, and that's my favorite location on board because it's the panoramic lounge where you can take a look over the ship's bow. Areas like this are getting quite rare on newer cruise ships. On most new cruise ships, these areas are exclusively reserved for passengers that have booked a suite, and most normal passengers cannot enjoy the view over the ship's bow anymore. But here on the Aurora it is possible in a quite big and beautiful lounge. I really love the design of the lounge. It's nice, comfortable, bright. You have fantastic panoramic views, good drinks. So of course this was my favorite location here on board, especially on a day at sea. Here we can see the seating area right next to the window with a look over the ship's bow, and that again shows why I prefer ships like the Aurora over newer ships, not only because of the classic atmosphere, the maritime design, but also because there are so much public areas and you feel that you have much more space than on newer ships, because when the ship was built there was also a focus on the public areas, on giving the passengers a lot of space instead of just focusing on making as much money as possible. Right next to the crow's nest we have the library, which is also quite big. There are a lot of books that you can get from here, so you can leave your books at home and just get one here in the library. You can sit down here in the library to read a book, but of course you can also take the book with you. I would recommend going just a couple of meters to the crow's nest, and you can read your book there with a nice view over the ship's bow. So as you can see, a quite big selection of books, so you do not have to take books with you from at home for the days at sea. You can just easily get them here in the library. And now we've already seen my favorite area here in the front, and we can head up to the next deck. It's not officially part of the deck plan, but this would be now deck 14, and here we have a big outer area once again with a nice view over the ship's bow as well. Of course I was doing my ship tour very early in the morning when most passengers were still sleeping, but then also sun lounges are not set up yet, so that's why it looks a bit empty. But of course when the weather is better, this area will be filled with sun lounges, and if you want to be directly in the sun you can go here. Of course there are also a lot of spaces where you can get a sun lounger in the shadow, but of course there are also a lot of possibilities to lay in the sun directly. Here we can take another look down to the Riviera pool area. We can also take a look from up here. We can see this interesting layout once again. Continuing, heading to the aft of the ship. Here we are at the next pool area. This is the crystal pool area. We can see the retractable roof once again. We can take another look down to the pool area, and then we are slowly getting to the end of our ship tour. We have now almost seen all public areas of this ship. As you can see, it is a fantastic ship, and I really enjoyed staying on board. And this ship became immediately one of my favorite cruise ships, especially because of the aft terrace, which are hard to find on cruise ships nowadays. Most cruise ships have expensive balcony cabins there, but here on the Aurora you have a lot of outdoor areas. There are just a handful of ships left in the world with such a beautiful aft terrace. For example, the half-sister of the Aurora, the Oriana, former fleet mate, which is now coming back to Europe apparently with a Spanish cruise operator, and if she's actually coming back, for sure there will be a video about her as well on my channel in the future. Or for example there is the Artania, which is a German cruise ship which also used to sail for P&O Cruises. as Artemis and a few other cruise ships, but it's beautiful aft terrace like this is quite rare. Also here we have a big sun deck, as you can see, a lot of space. We have a separate place for games like shuffleboard. We have just seen the sports court, and here we have a golf simulator. Both the sports court and the golf simulator are covered with nets so that nothing can go overboard. And that means that we have now seen all public areas of this wonderful ship. Here we can see the ship's name, Aurora, once again. And now we're coming to the end of the tour. In my next video I will show you a bit more about the life on board, about the food, and I will show you my cabin in detail. So here you can see when this video will be uploaded and the name of the song. As always, I'd like to say thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful for you. And of course I would be very grateful if you would comment, like, subscribe or share the video link. And of course I hope to see you in my next video then.